Um, let's go to the SEC real quick. We're doing quick previews on 4 teams because we've run out of time essentially, and wanted to get a few more teams in here before we get out of it. We didn't do all 16 teams, but I'd say we did more than half of everybody because we started earlier in the year with some of them. Let's start with South Carolina, Cole. It's been the Cole show today. Sorry, Tom.
All right. All right, so South Carolina, they went 9-3 last season. They were the hottest team to close out 2024 in the SEC. They felt like that they belonged in the college football playoff, and I'll be completely real. TJ, Tom, that interception by Nicky Manwari should have counted against LSU. They should have been 10-2. They should have been in the playoff. They had every right to complain about officiating in the SEC last season, but then they lose to Illinois, and it kind of negates the argument altogether. We had the big fight between Bielema and Beamer, which is awesome. More down the sidelines in bowl games. Go ahead and invoke the animosity. I love that stuff. It's great for the sport. But now it's time to rebuild. This is not a rebuilding year. It certainly feels like a retooling year. Yeah, the most important piece figured out, quarterback. Lenore Sellers, you talk to people down in Columbia, they think he's the best quarterback in college football. You ask me, I could see a scenario where he is the best quarterback in college football. He is going to have to carry his team 10 times out of 10. But they also do feel good about the offensive line. They do feel good about what they have at wide receiver. They didn't go out in the portal and bring in anybody the way that Penn State did. And honestly, that was a big time selling point for me to believe if we see one wide receiver make that jump over to South Carolina, I think that we are talking about them as a college football playoff threat, not a dark horse, an actual threat, but they believe in the young players, whether it be Alex Cyrus or whether it be Sellers' little brother, whether it be a Malik Clark. You bring back Nick Harbor, you bring back Mazeo Bennett, you still have Jared Brown on the roster. The running back room is going to be really the kind of selling point. We're less than 10 days away from kickoff in Atlanta. This is a Sunday morning game. Is Rasul Faison going to be playing for them? Because if Rasul Faison is playing for them, you have, I think, a stable running back and a good complementary piece to pair alongside with a quarterback that needs a good running back. If not, is it Oscar Attaway? Is it Jawan Howell? Who is going to be that lead back that you trust to kind of take some pressure off of Lenore Sellers? Reports coming out of Columbia right now, they really like what they have seen from his progression as a passer. And largely that has to do with everything that Mike Shula has implemented. So Dow Logan's kind of brought the best version of Lenore Sellers on the ground out. Now you're seeing the best version of the passing coming out with Mike Shula, who was an offensive analyst last season for the Gamecocks, that's now taking over and calling plays. Offensive line feels really good. The defense is going to be the selling point. The defense last year carried them to wins in multiple games where the offense was stale. It was anemic. It wasn't able to find any life because of it gave second chance opportunities. You had the SEC Defensive Player of the Year in Kyle Kennard. You had a freshman phenom in Dylan Stewart that was kind of figuring out what his role was going to be. You had good depth on the defensive line with Tonka Hemingway and TJ Sanders. You had good linebacker play with Debo Williams, Nicky Manwari in the back end of the secondary, 2 veteran cornerbacks. And all of that is now off to the Sunday game. It was so good that we watched them transition and prove to the NFL people we're good enough to continue our playing careers. So what do? You had a back portal in a lot of pieces. You still have Clayton White as your signal caller, which is a good thing because I think that Clayton White is one of the more underappreciated running defense coordinators in the sport. But you had to bring in a lot of new talent. Gabriel Brown-Landindy comes on in from Texas A&M. You bring in the Florida State linebacker. You bring in Justin Okoronkwo from Alabama. You still have Jelon Kilgore in the nickel position, but you also brought in Brandon Cisse from NC State. You brought in a couple of new safety positions. So it's a lot of new. What's going to be interesting is that you start off the season with Virginia Tech, but you got a couple of close games afterwards. You got to go travel to Missouri. You got to go down to Death Valley to face off against LSU. How quickly can this defense all come together and kind of gel as one cohesive unit? Not a bunch of transfers, not a bunch of guys that were waiting in the wings. They all play one certain balance. Because if they do that, I mean, it may not be a top 20 defense like it was last season, but you'll take a top 40 defense if your passing attack improves. You'll take a top 40 defense if you're able to be more efficient in the red zone with the passing game and with the third down conversions. You'll take that as long as it flips. The X factor player is naturally Lenore Sellers, but I think that Nick Harbor is going to have to step on up as wide receiver 1. Remember, you watch the highlights of him. Like when we were talking about him coming out of high school, they weren't focusing in on his football stats. They were looking at his track stats, what he was doing as a potential Olympic runner. And now he's had the entire offseason to not worry about track and field. He's actually played in the spring and fall camp. He's built a rapport with Lenore Sellers. I think he has to live up to those expectations. We talk about that speed. We talk about that physicality. We talk about that potential of what he can be as a vertical threat. If he ends up hitting his stride at the right time, it takes a lot of pressure off of Mazeo Bennett, Takes a lot of pressure off of Jordan Dingle, the new tight end coming on in from Kentucky. Takes a lot of pressure off of one of the freshmen, or Jared Brown if he's the slot receiver. He's got to be the X factor, I think, for this team to kind of take the flight. I think their overall potential is a 10-2 season. I could see them easily holding their own. The game against Clemson's at home at Willie B. They get to welcome in Alabama for homecoming. They get to welcome in Oklahoma right after playing at LSU. And Oklahoma's going to be coming off at the Red River Shootout. There's a lot of good matchups where Willie B., which is, in my opinion, the most underappreciated college football stadium in the history of the sport, is going to have moments to shine. They are going to have to play some tough road games. They are traveling down to Oxford. They are traveling over to Columbia, Missouri. They are playing in a neutral site game against Virginia Tech that may end up being the tone setter. But I look at this team and I think that their ceiling is 10-2. Their floor is 6-6. You have a quarterback in Lenore Sellers that is going to have to lead you game by game into victory. But you have a quarterback in Lenore Sellers. That should at least get you to bowl eligibility. What I wonder about this team most of all, and what's going to decide the season, is how quickly can everyone gel together? And how quickly can they put last season behind them? Because if last season is last season, yeah, you can feel like that you were snubbed. You can feel like that you weren't able to sustain anything. You can feel like that your team definitely deserved a spot in the playoff, but nobody wants to hear about it. You have to focus in on the here and now. This is a team that has talent. This is a team that has playmakers. This is a team that I do believe is going to hold its own in every single matchup. But you got to believe that last season wasn't a fluke. Last season wasn't your one and done, and now you're being punished by not going to the playoff this year. You have to have the same mentality you had after playing good against LSU for the rest of this year. And if you do that, South Carolina's going to be a threat. I think they're a 9-3 team at the end of the season.
I like the way they bounced back from the LSU game, where I agree with you completely. They got jobbed and absolutely should have won that game. Maybe they can just claim it like Auburn did a couple of titles here this week. That LSU game is the one I'm looking at. I mean, you mentioned Virginia Tech. They got to go to Missouri. Obviously, Pavia comes to town too. I would say it's more likely than not that they start out 5-0. Right? I can't guarantee that. Certainly, they could trip up any one of those three games that I just mentioned. But I like them to start 5-0. And if they go 5-0 to LSU having already played at Clemson and against DJ Lagway in Florida, what's LSU's record at that point, right? Do they split those two games? Do they have a couple of wins? Shoot, could you imagine if they had two losses and 5-0 South Carolina was coming in? Either way, going to Baton Rouge there with last year, again, you talked about forgetting last year. Listen, they may forget the year, but they ain't going to forget what happened in that game. Going into that game at potentially 5-0 in Death Valley, probably a night game when it is all said and done. That is the game on the schedule. Now, there's a lot of other fun stuff too. Alabama, Ole Miss, Clemson at the end of the year. But that's the one I think you win that one and you start out 6-0, man, but buckle up because you're talking about a top 3 or 4 team at that point. Let's bounce back and forth on this just because I miss hearing Tom's.
I miss hearing Tom's voice. I need a breather.
Let me give Cole a chance to drink some coffee or water or something. Well, it's game week. It could be something even stronger in there.